Hello, Rochester fifth grade teachers. My name is Molly Gale. I'm one of the social studies consultants at Oakland Schools, and I am going to walk you through teaching fifth grade social studies with MC3. So shortly, you're going to begin the scavenger hunt that's going to guide you through the course and especially let you dig into Unit 1. But first, I am going to give you a quick overview of what this new course is all about. So this is really your 10,000-foot view. So the course in fifth grade is framed with the compelling question, how should we tell the stories of early America? So this is the question that students are going to progressively work on answering over the course of the year. So at the end of every unit, they have a chance to go back and take a look at what they can add to their argument to this question. And one thing to point out is that we're talking about the stories of early America. So it's plural purposely. We're trying to have kids in this course really take a look at the variety of stories and the variety of voices in early America. This is the pacing guide for the course, which in a minute I'll show you on Atlas as well and show you how to navigate to it. So the course is set up as 6 units. The first unit is a little bit longer than the others. It's scheduled to be 7 to 8 weeks, depending on what other things you do at the very beginning of the year. Then each of the next units, 2 through 5, are each 6 weeks. And then the last unit is supposed to be 4 weeks. So how do you create a successful country? That's the unit where students are really going to take a look at the Articles of Confederation, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. So I'm going to give you a second just to take a look at the questions on the screen. Each of the units is framed with a compelling question, just as the course is framed with a compelling question. So in Unit 1, students are looking at how different people's perspectives shape their view of the world. In Unit 2, what was the impact of colonization in North America? 3, how did different people's perspectives shape their ideas about farming, working, trade, slavery, and government? In Unit 4, it's taking a look at the years before the outbreak of the American Revolution, and the kids are investigating whether the people in the colonies were patriots or traitors. In Unit 5, the question is, was the American Revolution revolutionary? And students track that throughout the unit. And finally, Unit 6, how do you create a successful country? I will point out there are a couple of these units that while they are paced to be 6 weeks, the actual instructional days are less than that. And we did that purposely in a couple of units throughout the year, so that it gave you a little bit of leeway and a little bit of flexibility as you're teaching the curriculum in case there are other interruptions in your school schedule, which of course we know happens all the time. So the fifth grade revisions, I wanted to give you a little bit of background into what we did in revising this course and why we did it. So the Michigan Citizenship Collaborative Curriculum, which of course is nicknamed MC3, you may also hear it referred to as MESA or Atlas. Atlas is the system that the MC3 curriculum is housed in. The curriculum was written originally as a response to the very first social studies standards. At this point, many of those courses are getting a little bit old. Some of them were written in the mid-2000s to late 2000s. So what we began doing in 2021, 2022 was revising these courses. The revisions include an update to the 2019 social studies standards. So they're aligned to the new standards. They're also aligned to the C3 framework. So you'll notice that they are framed through a lens of inquiry. There was also a lens of DEI built into these courses. So in 8th grade, the course was revised over the course of last school year. So that's fully updated. The 5th grade course was revised over the course of this school year. That is fully updated. And the 3rd and 4th grade courses are being revised starting now. So we're beginning work on grades 3 and 4. Those will be ready to use in the fall on a rolling basis. The first unit of both of those courses will be published in July. After that, we're going to finish elementary school, and then we'll be moving up to revise the high school courses. So one of the reasons these courses, as I mentioned, needed to be revised is because a lot has happened in social studies education in the past 10 years. So NCSS has a vision statement, and I'll give you a sec just to read it right here. The National Council for the Social Studies tells us that the primary purpose of social studies is to help young people develop the ability to make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens of a culturally diverse, democratic society and an interdependent world. So the C3 framework came out in 2013. So at this point, it's 10 years old. And the C3 framework was is the framework through which the National Council for the Social Studies thinks social studies is best taught and learned. The C3 framework, as many of you know, is really all about inquiry. It's, are we having kids ask and answer real, authentic, rigorous questions of the discipline, and teaching them how to use a multitude of sources and disciplinary lenses to create evidence, to gather evidence, to make arguments for those questions, and then to take what they learned and to go out and do something with it. So to convey what they're learning, convey that new knowledge, as well as to take civic action. So again, I'll give you a second just to take a look at this excerpt from the C3 Framework's introduction. And as you're taking a look at that, this really then drove the revision of Michigan standards. So Michigan standards, which the revision process started prior to 2019, but they were approved by the Board of Education in 2019. So the revised Michigan standards, you'll notice in this introduction to the document, have quite a few parallels to the C3 framework because the standards were updated through the lens of the C3 framework. And in fact, the Michigan standards tell us that we should be using inquiry to teach social studies. The nice thing about fifth grade, this course, is that it's set up through a lens of inquiry. And so you'll notice questions play a really important role in the course. Last but not least, the essential practices for disciplinary literacy in 2019, the secondary practices came out, and you'll notice there's once again a lot of parallels across these four columns. That learning is problem or question driven. Students are learning how to access and analyze and create a variety of texts. That we're using disciplinary literacy instructional practices. While these are 6-12 practices, we know that kids can't jump into 6th grade and immediately start doing that. So there's a lot of disciplinary literacy scaffolds built into the 5th grade course that you'll see teaching kids how to read, think, and write, for instance, like historians, which is really preparing them to head into 6th grade and approach just some disciplinary literacy from a deeper lens. So within the 5th grade course, there are a variety of questions. As we said, the course is framed with a compelling question. Each unit is framed with a compelling question, and then each lesson is framed with a question. So as students answer questions within each lesson, they then are able to go back at the end of the unit and make an argument to that compelling question for the unit. And by the end of the course, our hope is that they can go back and write an argument to that course compelling question. These compelling questions in social studies need to be real world, authentic, intellectually rigorous, debatable questions that are interesting to students. And we did our very best, along with the writers who worked on this course with us, to develop questions that we thought met those parameters. Each unit is also ended with a summative performance task. You'll notice these are aligned to the C3 framework. So at the end of every unit, students write an argument to that unit compelling question using everything they learn. And that argument can take a number of different forms, as you'll see when you dig in to your scavenger hunt shortly. They also, though, include a chance for students to extend what they learned and an opportunity for them to take informed action. So all of that is included in the summative performance task at the end of each unit. So in a minute, as I mentioned, you'll be doing your scavenger hunt, and it will walk you through how to dig into Atlas and the MC3 course, and it'll take you through the course level and then have you dig into Unit 1. So I wanted to give you just a quick sort of tour of how to navigate Atlas so that when you get in there, it looks familiar. So I'm going to actually dive right in and then come back to this slide. So when you go to the 5th grade course, the landing page has the course overview. Talks a little bit about the role of literacy and the sequencing of units, the rationale for the course, and the alignment to standards, frameworks, and practices. And then it has the pacing guide here at the bottom. So you'll notice we have units 1 through 6. It does let you know how long they are intended to be taught. When you click into a unit, it takes you to the unit landing page. So once you're on the unit landing page and they're all set up the same, you'll notice the first thing is that overarching question. In this case, and for social studies, it's the compelling question for the unit. Each unit has a unit graphic organizer. There's a unit abstract, which will give you sort of an idea of what students are going to do in that unit, as well as what content is addressed in that unit. Then it has the content, standards, and expectations. As I mentioned, these are all aligned to the 2019 Michigan Social Studies standards. They're also aligned to the Common Core standards, and they're aligned to the C3 framework indicators. So when it looks like there's a lot of standards, it's because we've aligned each lesson and each unit to all of them. So you can scroll past these, or you can take a look at them. When you get below that, you'll notice the focus questions. These are the lesson questions for the whole unit. You'll see key concepts, intellectual processes, and on the left side, and this is probably what you're most interested in getting to, is the lesson sequence. The lesson sequence for the unit has all of the lesson plans, all of the supplemental materials, and all of the slide decks. So each lesson has a lesson plan, which is a step-by-step sequencing of the lesson for the teacher. They also have the supplemental materials. These are all of the materials students will need, which includes all the student handouts, any materials at all. So the curriculum can be taught completely within what you see here. There's no need for any external resources. And then every lesson has a slide deck. The slide deck is fully built out and ready to go, and it is linked within the lesson. When you click into a lesson, and I'll just take you into lesson 1 here. When it opens, it will ask you to create a template. So it's forcing you to make your own copy. So you can go ahead and do that. You'll notice at the top, you'll have the lesson question. You'll always have the big ideas of the lesson. You have a lesson abstract, the standards the lesson is aligned to, and key concepts. You'll have any teacher notes at the top that we think are things teachers should know ahead of teaching the lesson. And then you'll have the lesson sequence. So the lesson sequence is step-by-step, walking through every piece of the lesson. The MC3 is written for first-year teachers and long-term subs so that they could follow this lesson plan. So you'll notice it is very explicit and very step-by-step. So as you read through it the first time, I'm sure you'll notice, especially you veteran teachers, you'll notice there are places where you might condense things or where you don't need quite as much direction as is in here. And so just keep that in mind as you go through. It'll take you through day 1's activities. And then if it's a multi-day lesson, not all of them are, this one is, it'll tell you where the approximate day break is. And then at the end of the lesson, you'll have all the resources. So this is all of the standards, the instructional resources, and any citations. So I'm going to take you back out now to the slide deck. So like we said, the unit page has all of these components. You also can use these little arrows to collapse those sections for easier navigation. So you can collapse each of them if that's helpful. If you want to, for instance, collapse the standards so you can get down right here to the lesson sequence, feel free to do that. And then again, when you get into the lesson plan, each lesson has all of these documents. So it has the lesson question, the recommended length, the big ideas, the abstract, etc. The supplemental materials have a graphic organizer for the lesson. They have big ideas. They have all of the vocabulary cards. We call them word cards, which we'll talk about in a minute, and all of the student handouts. And then there's the slide deck. 5th grade MC3 is completely built into Google. So everything is in Google Docs and Google Slides. So there are scaffolds embedded throughout the course that I just wanted to draw your attention to. You see them all on the screen here, and I'm going to specifically show you some examples of a few of them. We're going to focus today just on word cards, adapted text, and journaling. Collaborative learning activities are a really important part of the course, and they're built throughout, as well as turn and talks, giving students time to process. Because we think you're probably more familiar with those, we wanted to dive into the top 3 so we could show you some examples. MC3 has word cards built into every single lesson. So they look just like this. These are word cards out of lesson 1. They always include the word, a definition that is written in 5th grade friendly words. They have an image that represents that word. And then there's always an example where the word is used in context. So it depends on the lesson. Some lessons have multiple word cards, so some have fewer. It just depends on what the topic is. But these word cards play a really important role in the course. At the very beginning of Atlas on the course landing page, you'll notice this hyperlink document, which is all about vocabulary and journaling throughout the course. When you visit it, sorry, it's taking a second to load. When you go to it, it'll talk about the word cards. It will also give you ideas of what you can do with these word cards to preview a lesson, during a lesson, and after a lesson. So there's lots of different ways these can be used. The lesson plans do include the introduction of these vocabulary words in context, and things you can do with them, but this is more ideas for you about how to use these word cards effectively. One thing we do want to say though is that the word cards are not intended for vocabulary quizzes. So they're not intended to be used as out of context vocabulary, and they're not intended just to be quizzed on. They really are built into the lessons in context, and these are some activities that can help you do that. So another thing throughout the 5th grade course is there are adapted texts. So every text we're putting in front of kids, we've adapted it to the best we can to make it accessible for 5th graders. So there's a variety of different ways we've adapted them, and I just wanted to show you a couple of them. One thing we do is add head notes. So you'll notice in both of these are 2 different styles, but there's head notes on both of these sources. The head notes are going to give students any information that they need to go into this course with some contextualization. So for instance, in this one, it tells a little bit about this person before they read his account. And this one, it talks about where the source came from and what might be helpful to know about it. So you'll see head notes throughout the course within sources. Another thing we do is a lot of vocabulary clarification. In addition to word cards, you'll sometimes see vocabulary that's not in the word cards is pulled out and explained. So in this source in Unit 1 about Portuguese exploration and colonization, we've defined the word maritime just to the right of the text so students have it. We also have built in graphic organizers. So you can see in this one, it's showing where these Portuguese colonies in the Atlantic Ocean lay, just so students can visualize that text a little better as they read it. We do sometimes actually rewrite text. So if a text is particularly challenging for the 5th grade, there are times we always note that it's been adapted, but we will rewrite difficult portions to make it accessible for 5th grade. And another thing we do is excerpt. Pretty often, especially from historical documents, we don't need the students to read the entire document, which might be dozens of pages long. So you'll notice that sometimes we do excerpt and just pull out the parts we really want to draw students' attention to. One thing you will also notice that's been a shift in this revision of 5th grade is the language. So there are some intentional language shifts we've made. One is that Indigenous peoples and Indigenous nations are used. We do name the specific nation where possible, but you will see the shift in language to Indigenous peoples and Indigenous nations. And there is a note about that at the start of the lesson where students first see that as well. So this is a conversation to have with students. Another shift that we've made is moving away from the word slave and using enslaved people. Enslaved people emphasizes that was the status put upon them. That was not who they were. So this first centers their humanity. So enslaved people is used throughout the course. And similarly, we refer to enslavers. So you will notice in some primary sources, other terms will be used, but within the lessons, we've chosen the word enslavers. And this is, again, conversations that in the lesson plans, it talks about having these conversations with students as well. Another shift you'll notice is that rather than using the word plantations, we've shifted to slave labor camps. Black people is capitalized. You will notice white people is not throughout the course. And again, there are notes for all of this within the lesson plans with teacher notes, giving you background information as well as telling you what you might discuss with children about this. You'll notice as well when you get to Unit 2 that we use the word colonizer rather than settler, and we do that deliberately. This is making sure that we're centering the system of colonization in these lessons and emphasizing that it's not to say someone settled is to imply that that land was open and uninhabited, which we know was not the case. And that's a central thing that students look at in Unit 1. So in Unit 2, we do use the word colonizer rather than settler, although you will see the word settler used in other places in the unit and in some sources. Last but not least, and this comes up a little bit later in the course, I believe in Unit 3, students will see it, rather than the term runaway slaves, we have shifted to the term freedom seekers. So again, you'll notice a greater complexity of language in this course, and please take the time to read those teacher notes about why each of these was made and how you can have this conversation with students. So journaling, again, plays a really important part of the course. You'll notice students are journaling in their detective journals. That's what we call them in this course, because students are historical detectives trying to solve these mysteries of history. Again, in that same document that we looked at a minute ago with vocab and journaling throughout the course. The second page is all about journaling, the second section. Students, prior to the course beginning, we recommend taking some time to have students decorate their journals and gain some ownership of them. Within each lesson plan, it says exactly where you can have students do journaling, whether they're reflecting, whether they're brainstorming, sometimes they're sketching, sometimes they're just writing down ideas after they had a discussion. And always at the end of the lesson, they go back and answer the lesson question in their detective journals. So this gives you some more detailed information about how to use them, how often you can use them, and what other ideas you can use with them that go beyond the lesson. So in a minute, as I said, you're going to be diving into the scavenger hunt. So I'll let you do that to go deeper into Unit 1 and to take a look at what that unit looks like, and to get a closer look at some of the lesson plans. One thing that I did want to point out about the first unit is that in lesson 7, there is an inquiry on West Africa. And we're pointing this out because this will look a little bit different than the other lesson plans, because this one is written into the IDM blueprint from the C3 framework, which I'll talk to you about. And actually, I do want to actually go back for 1 second, so bear with me here. One thing to note about the journals that I wanted to mention that I forgot, these are places for students to process, to reflect, to really grapple with ideas. And at the end of a lesson, we're having them form an argument to that lesson question. But these are not intended to be graded summatively for accuracy. So we really do want to make sure the journals are kept as formative places where students can practice. And just to remind you that that is their purpose in the course, not to be graded at the end of the lesson as a summative assessment. And we can, if you have more questions about that, we can certainly talk about it moving forward. So I apologize. So getting back into the West Africa inquiry. So I'm going to show you what the IDM blueprint looks like. And again, it's set up a little bit differently than the other lesson plans. Though, the inquiry is driven with a compelling question. In this case, the compelling question is, how did the people of West Africa overcome the challenges of the region to create great kingdoms and empires? So the IDM blueprint is part of the C3 framework. So the C3 uses this blueprint to set up inquiries. And it's helpful the first time you look at it just to have someone sort of guide you through what the components are. The C3's IDM blueprint is centered around questions, tasks, and sources. So it's what questions are we having students investigate, what tasks are they taking up, and what sources are they using to do that. So within the blueprint, you'll see questions in 2 spots. You'll see that compelling question. That's that rigorous, authentic, debatable question that kids are going to take up. And then you'll see a series of supporting questions. Supporting questions do have answers. These are concrete questions where students are building content knowledge that they are going to use to answer that compelling question. So whereas the compelling question is debatable and there's multiple ways to answer it with multiple forms of evidence, the supporting questions actually do have answers to them. The tasks appear in a variety of places. There's a staging the question. This is really, this is the task that students are going to do to get them hooked, to get them engaged in this topic. And it's going to be what they do just ahead of learning what the compelling question is. The formative performance tasks accompany the supporting questions. So each supporting question that students are taking up has sources with it, and then a formative task, which is really designed just for you to be able to spot check whether students got what they were supposed to out of that piece of content. Then there's a summative performance task. So at the end of the inquiry, students are always going to form an argument to that compelling question. So the summative performance task is always an argument, although the argument can take multiple forms, whether that's written, whether it's something you're having students do out loud, whether it's some sort of artistic argument. But that argument will always go back and address that compelling question. And then there's an extension and a chance for students to take informed action. Last but not least, of course, are the sources, which are extremely important. So the sources are what we're putting in front of kids where they're going to be able to analyze them to build content to answer those supporting questions. Sources take a variety of different forms. They can be text, they could be videos, they could be interviews, they could be images, they could be maps. So the sources are very diverse, but you'll notice that each set of sources is paired with that supporting question, and students are using these to build an argument to the compelling question. This is the blueprint you'll see in lesson 7. So when you get to lesson 7 and you open it, you'll notice that in this one, we have the compelling question at the top, which students are investigating over the course of a number of days. So this is a multi-day inquiry for students. It does have the standards at the top that it's aligned to. And then this is a step-by-step process of walking students through the staging the compelling question. This is what the activity you're going to do with kids to get them interested in this topic and to get them thinking. The supporting questions are then on the next page. And you'll notice each supporting question is paired with a formative performance task. Again, these are just for you to be able to check whether students really got it. So for instance, in supporting question 2, when you look at how do West African rulers use natural resources and trade to build strong empires, you check whether the students are able to compare these 3 empires and on a graphic organizer. And that allows you to very quickly check whether the students understood what they were supposed to do in supporting question 2. The featured sources are here. They're all included, so you don't have to go find anything. Everything is linked and included in the documents. And then at the end, we have the summative performance task where students are forming an argument to the compelling question. There's an extension and a chance to take informed action. Within this inquiry, you'll notice there's a lot of pages to it because it really does step-by-step walk you through how to implement this from the teacher view. So it will tell you exactly what you can do for these sources, whether you're doing them together with students, whether they're doing them at stations, whether it's a paired activity. So it does scaffold you as well, the teacher, through how to implement this in your classroom. So the parts of an inquiry you'll see are first those questions like we talked about. You'll have compelling questions and supporting questions. Ideally, if we were doing this live, we would have you talk about the question on the screen. What's the difference between the compelling question here and the supporting question? And hopefully what you're noticing is that supporting question that has a very specific answer to it. What were the regulations placed on the colonists under the Townshend Acts? There is an answer to that. It's definitive. We want students to have a concrete answer using evidence. The compelling question is debatable. They're very good arguments that the revolution was revolutionary and very good arguments that it was not revolutionary. So students can take a position on that question as long as they are supporting it with evidence. So it's an evidence-based argument. We hope, our goal is always to make these questions rigorous intellectually. This is a question that I'm interested in taking up, as an adult and someone who's taught history for a long time. We think also kids will be interested in this American Revolution that was supposed to be, that we've always been told was changed everything about America. Was it revolutionary? And there's, again, as throughout the unit, students will take a look at this question and really look at the ways it was revolutionary and the ways it was not. And then they get to make an argument to that at the end. So these questions, like we said, compelling questions, you'll notice, frame the course and they frame the units. Supporting questions within an inquiry are usually not debatable. They're fact-based. The responses are going to be based on sources. And these are really the supporting questions are where students are able to sustain the inquiry. It's where we give them the content that they need to be able to form an informed evidence-based argument to the compelling question. So the next thing in the inquiry that we talked about are the tasks. You'll see that each supporting question has a task. Typically, that first supporting question, the task is usually the least complicated, and we build up to a more complicated task for the later supporting questions. But all of the tasks work together to help students build both content knowledge and argumentation skills. Last but not least, of course, are the sources. And like we said, they're very thoughtfully put together. There's a diversity of sources in terms of medium. There's a diversity of authorship. The goal of the sources is to spark curiosity and sustain the inquiry. Also to build that disciplinary knowledge. This is really where kids get the content that they need. They're learning a lot about West Africa in this inquiry because they're grappling with a lot of different sources. We really make an effort to have them encounter various points of view and to gather evidence to support that claim. So at the end of this inquiry, they're able to go back and make an argument to that compelling question. So again, lesson 7 is different than the others in that sense. And let me just really quickly show you that again. So when you're in lesson 7, these are set up in the traditional format that I showed you earlier. But when you get to lesson 7 and you open that inquiry, you will notice that's the single lesson within this unit that does look a little different because it's set up in the IDM template. There's also a full IDM template, a full inquiry in unit 3 as well, and in unit 6. So you'll see these sporadically throughout the course. So before you get started in just a sec on the scavenger hunt, just wanted to give you a couple of things to think about. So for your consideration, as you work through the scavenger hunt, we'd encourage you to start thinking about, and I know this seems far away right now, but start thinking about the fall. Before teaching content, think about some of those beginning of the year routines that you know have to be built in at the beginning of the year. Think about setting some time aside to build a brave space with your students. It's so important for so much of the work they're doing in this course. Within this 5th grade course, they're really taking up interesting and deep concepts that I think building that space at the beginning of the year is really important for. As you start looking through the lessons more carefully, think about how you might adapt them. MC3 is written to be adapted. It's meant to be adapted to your context. So you may find that you need to make some adjustments. So think about what those might be. The other thing to think about right off the bat is that pacing. So the first unit is 8 weeks long, 7 to 8 weeks, depending. But that's also designed if social studies is being taught for 45 to 60 minutes, 5 days a week. So the first unit, as well as the whole course for 5th grade, is built on that framework that there's a dedicated 45 minutes to an hour every day of the week. If that is not the case for you, you probably need to think about how you will adjust and shorten lessons so that you can still keep that pace. It is important because as you see, as you move through this course, it's a chronological course. So you want to make sure that you are honoring that pacing so that by the end of the year, you're able to get through that final unit where students are really getting a preview of the Constitution, which is very important as they head into 8th grade, which is the continuation of this course. Think about allotting time to read through the teacher guide, the supplemental materials, and the slides before the time you teach them. As you can see, the first time you pick up one of these lessons, there's a lot to look through. So when might you be able to build in time to read through these lessons and teacher guides and supplemental materials and take a look at the slide deck so you feel comfortable when you go in to teach it. And last but not least, just think about the materials from the lessons you might need or need to provide for students. So how might you, for instance, do those journals? Is that something that you're planning to have students bring in? Is it something that you're planning to provide for them? So think through what materials might be helpful within this course. So thanks for staying with me. I know that was a lot, but I do want to let you get into your scavenger hunt. This is our OS social studies team. Stacy Woodward and Christopher Lee work alongside me. I'm Molly Gale again, and we are happy anytime to answer questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Our emails are on the screen, and we are excited to have you use this course and happy to answer questions as you encounter them as you go. Thanks, and have a wonderful rest of your day.